Ladies and gentlemen, from the depths of flyover country in the heartland of America, the Kansas City on the other side of the mighty Mo, welcome to Hittin the Bricks with Kathleen, the do-it-yourself genealogy podcast with your questions and her answers. I am John, your humble hubby host, and today we'll be talking about a Congress you're less likely to hate, the U.S. Congressional Serial Set. Now that you're here, we have a quorum, so let's start hitting the bricks. Hey, baby.
You're so silly. But John, it sounds like you have me on a tight schedule.
I do. We're on tight schedules these days. So it's a great segue to talk about schedules. And let's talk about schedules here for a moment. Because normally we do 2 podcasts a month. That's been our schedule.
And I'm hearing podcasters across the nation laughing because they do like 2 a week.
Oh, I know.
But that's okay.
There's people who do far more. But my poor wife is working with me, so 2 is Herculean as far as what we've been doing to get me to actually do the studio work in it. But we're going on a summer schedule, so we're only going to be doing 1 a month for the summer, basically. And explain to them why I am failing our listeners by dropping down to just 1 podcast a month. Why are we doing this?
Well, because we're also having our book published right now, and you are the lead InDesign person, if not the only one right now.
No, that is the only one.
That is the only one?
I would love to be able to subcontract, but I am not subcontracting. Chewy refused the job.
So the book Behind the Uniform is being written and in the publishing stage. We have a short time frame for that, and you have to do double duty. So thank you for that, though.
Oh, you're welcome. It's so much fun. It's just the way I imagine my retirement. On to other pleasant topics. You got very excited about this podcast upcoming, this one that we're doing right now, because you said it was about the Congressional Set.
Congressional Serial Set.
Congressional Serial Set. So this doesn't have anything to do with Congress eating breakfast, nothing
Not
like
that kind of cereal, John.
If I get to my notes, I would probably know that.
You should know that. Do you even know what the Congressional Serial Set is and what its purpose is?
No, of course not. I know nothing about the Congressional Serial Set.
Okay, so let's talk about that first. What it is the government's record, and it is literally a congressional record from the early times, right after the War of 1812. They have kept these records for every group of Congress. Now, actually, we can go back further, but they're not as clean. These records are now digitized and online. So what they do is it tells you what's going on in America, USA. But it tells us more than that, because people think it is about Congress, and it's not. It's about the citizens.
I think what I'm hearing is my ancestors, even if they're not politicians, might be part of congressional records.
Absolutely. I mean, they name our ancestors. I can't say all of our ancestors, but at any given time, your ancestor can be given their name in these records, whether it's for military or a petition or any kind of testimony. There are so many ways that I find them. The other day, when I was looking for a particular military person, I found them in prison in Washington, D.C. He was named, he was given his race, and why he was in prison.
And now, see, I'm kind of curious. Why was he in prison?
Well, one was...
Rabbit hole.
2 of them were highway robbers. Mm-hmm. One was accused of trying to sell enslaved people that were free. And so he was serving in D.C.
So what you're really describing is not what most people would think when they hear, congressional record.
They do, and they avoid it. Most genealogists avoid it. However, there's 2 things they need to know. One is they've been digitized. Not all of them, but many of them are already digitized on the govinfo.gov website. And and they're searchable. So you can just search for your ancestor in your county, your area for the time frame you're looking for.
So what kind of information would those records contain?
One of the records I was looking for with a client was for the Mexican-American War. And a lot of Americans sued Mexico. They wanted Mexico to pay for their losses. But the documents are there with your ancestors' name, what they were claiming, and how much they were claiming. And I'm going to do a blog on that part because people have asked me about that part.
Right.
And so if these people were often in the military, their questions for compensation or the Southern Claims Commission, if you were a Union person living in a Confederate state, they too were compensated. And so a lot of times we get more of the circumstances than on Ancestry or Family Search. I just want to make sure our listeners understand that the Congressional Serial Set is not just a lot of papers about Congress. It's really about the citizens. It's the citizens who wrote in and who are named, who are highlighted in these records for a cause, an issue, or some financial exchange that needed to be rectified.
So it might be grievance that they're writing in to their congressman.
That's one thing. Another one could be your ancestor, like my great-grandmother, might have made it to 100 years old, and the centenarians were honored by Congress. Their names may be in those records.
Oh, interesting. Is this where in the Congressional Serial Set, is this where Juneteenth comes into the conversation?
It is very closely tied to Juneteenth, and people overlook that also. The one thing about these records is they're not divided racially, but by issues, because it's the citizens bringing it up. So we can follow from the Reconstruction era to recently when Juneteenth was actually formalized as a federal holiday. We can follow what has happened through these years. What we normally do, John, in these circumstances when we're working with the Congressional Serial Sets, we use it as collaborative information, but it actually is a primary foundation, right? So let's say I'm working with the Freedmen Bureau records and I'm working with some formerly enslaved persons. What I can do is find more details with them, or about them rather, inside the congressional records. So we're tying it all together about an issue. So not only does it subset regions like the South or Northern state, it also will take issues, and we can also search these records by dates. So it allows me to get a fuller picture of what was going on with my ancestor. We don't always follow our ancestors' name directly, but we might follow their community. We might find a newspaper article that references an issue within, let's say, something leading up to the Juneteenth, like the Reconstruction era. And from there, I can dig into the Congressional Serial Set and get the background information that might even mention that community, the people who have approached their congressional representative, and get their information for my specific ancestor.
So there are literally thousands of individuals that you might be researching that might be your ancestor that might appear in a congressional record set or a congressional serial set.
One of the things that I should mention is when I'm talking, let's say, about the African Americans in the Reconstruction era, they were active participants and their voices were heard in the Congressional Serial Set. They were not just a subject of the Reconstruction, they were actually the movers who had an active voice in that movement.
I have heard you talk about the wonders and joys of the Southern Claims Commission. We've covered that before. I guess every genealogist knows that record set.
However, where there was an enslaved person, there was an enslaver. And It should be known by all genealogists because it's part of the American history. And it is recorded the activities of people's ancestors separate from the Congressional series, and then you can pull it together. A recent client that I was looking for was named DeLapp. And he was a slave trafficker, slave trader, rather.
No, I think you can use that interchangeably. Human trafficker, slave trader. It's just like a niche inside of
really
behaviors.
was.
That's all. Yeah.
But as I was following him, it was two brothers. One of the brothers died and asked for compensation for their company.
Because they lost a piece of property.
The DeLapp brothers, one of them passed away, and the other one wanted to make a claim on the property loss because they said that now they were really on the Union side. And they actually got cleared, even though they were slave traders, and they were cleared and were compensated for their company's loss. Southern Claims Commission, the people who were attached to the union could ask for compensation. Mm-hmm. Some of them just made it up, but they had to have witnesses. And who was a better witness than the person you enslaved? The enslaved people witnessed for their enslaver that they were actually union friendly.
Wow.
And that's where we see these people all tied together because somebody wants money. They present it to a congressional hearing, or they send in a petition or a request to their congressperson, and they get approved by it. It doesn't mean that the enslaver was really for the union, but it was decided they had a valid stance to be union friendly.
So the positive aspect from the research side of this, ignoring everything else that goes along with it, the positive side is that we're seeing that you could get the name of an ancestor that was enslaved.
Correct.
You could get their name and their information because they would have done court depositions?
Petitions. They did petitions and or affidavits that were included in the records.
Wow. That would be some, and I'm assuming you've read things like that.
I've read quite a few. And then when you do the research of actually what happened in history, which Congress didn't have digitized newspapers, but we do, you could see that they were literally slave traders. You actually could see their advertisement of who they were selling.
And then they would use their slaves in order to get compensation to defraud.
And a lot of times the previously enslaved person got something out of it. Maybe a piece of land, maybe a cow, or something out of it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm sure they got something out of it. I'm not even going down that road today. Not even.
Okay. But this is what I was telling you. The conversation about congressional serial sets is wonderful. Mm-hmm. It's a primary source.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
People are actually telling what they saw, when they saw it, where they saw it, and who was around them. What was the community or the neighbors who can also verify. It doesn't necessarily mean for the genealogists that what they said was honest. Some of it was coerced.
Yeah. But it doesn't really matter. Yeah, it doesn't really matter because from a research standpoint, the actual testimony is a lot of flavor. But if you're looking for an ancestor and can actually have their name, if that's what you're searching for, or who is their enslaver, or your ancestor who was an enslaver or a trafficker, that you're able to find that information out through the Congressional Serial Set, right?
Yes, because it also tells you about military service. It tells you if someone was a sailor or a soldier, or they got on a ship that may or may not have been legal. A lot of this is documented in those records. So you might find your ancestor on a ship in one of the manifest records, I say go and look up that ship and that information as much as you can to see if it had anything inside the Congressional Serial Set, because you get more background on it and you get more background of what happened. That was a fun one with that Mexican War one. It was all of the ship records and how many got commandeered. So I could see that a ship might have been taken by the Mexican country and they wanted their compensation for that ship.
So even if you're not finding your ancestor directly in any of these record sets, then you are at least seeing the world they lived in.
Oh, that's wonderful. The world they lived in for their time frame and often with their community, because remember, someone was representing your ancestor too. One of the records I found in Rutherford, North Carolina area, I think it was in Polk County, or it might have been Tyrone area, but in North Carolina, I found a record right after the Civil War with one of my ancestors who was leading the Reconstruction era change, making sure African Americans were registered to vote and that they were citizens. This is in 1860 still. And I have the documents that tell what this group was doing, and their names are on it. So I can look at the North Carolina information and take the Congressional Serial Set and corroborate that information and see where my ancestor was involved with this movement in this area.
Wow. That's a really powerful piece, and it is a primary source.
It is a primary source because the recording is being done by the people who did it at the time it was done.
Okay, so I know you said your family was mentioned, or your ancestor, I should say, was mentioned in this. Who are some of the other better known African Americans that appear?
So people like Hiram Revels, they know Robert Brown or Elliot and John Roy Lynch. These are people who were very well known to historians. But John, seriously, what excites me more than a few famous people, it's kind of like, not that we don't want to honor the same 4 or 5 people that we know in history books. Mm-hmm. It is that ordinary people, our ancestors, their names appeared in these testimonies and petitions and claims, and they were not famous. They are not well known. They might have been a supporter of a movement. They might have signed a petition. Many of them did affidavits and submitted them. They're there.
Well, those are the people we actually are researching. There's a small percentage of us who are looking for our famous ancestor, or will find our famous ancestor. But most of us are looking for the unnamed names that so often occur.
That's the whole point. Most of us aren't descended from senators. We're descended from citizens.
So what's our takeaway for listeners on this, Kathleen?
I would say our biggest takeaway is don't assume congressional records are only for politicians, because the Congressional Serial Set, it is really a record of Americans interacting with their government. And because of that, it's documented. And it's amazing what you will find. Veterans appear, widows appear, community advocates are in it, as well as the petition signers and even formerly enslaved individuals. They are in these records.
Well, yeah, and especially this time of year, it's worth remembering Juneteenth, that African Americans were not only the subjects of Reconstruction, they were active participants in the Reconstruction. That's a point you make often, is that progress has never been linear as it's often presented in history. Just after the Civil War, African Americans were far more prevalent and far more active, and were allowed to be far more active and prevalent in government roles even than they were in the 1960s.
That is correct, because they were doing a lot of suppression at that point, whereas there was a time, and we can see the change if we read on the issues, how the African voices were preserved in federal records. So those voices, they belong to our own ancestors.
Yeah. Good reason, if nothing else, an excellent reason to go to the... where do you find that again?
The website for the digitized version, and some of your libraries might have a full printed copy, is the govinfo.gov.
Okay. So you got the work cut out for you the rest of the month. Get to work then, people.
John, I have a mahjong game to play.
Well, congratulations. You made it to the end of another episode. Thanks so much for staying. Thanks to Chewy Chewbacca Brandt for his unwavering lack of interest in anything we're doing. Thanks to new listeners in South Korea, Vietnam, and Botswana. And of course, thanks to you for tuning in, downloading, and subscribing. The theme song for Hittin the Bricks was written and performed by Tony Fistknuckle and the Heatwaves. Watch for their next appearance at an anticyclone near you. Do you have a genealogical question for Kathleen? Drop us a line at hittinthebricks@gmail.com and let us know.